everybody, I'm Mark Verstegen, president and founder of Exos, and also the performance director for the NFL Players Association. Like my good friend Michael Boyle here, also kicked out a few books, done a few lectures, and done a ton of fun stuff globally. And I couldn't be more excited to go with one of my best friends and most respected mentors, Michael Boyle. Mike, how are you?
I am great, Mark. So we have to do the same intro. I have to figure out. So I am Michael Boyle. I am the founder, and I am still the 51% owner of Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning. There's been some changes that we might get to talk about at some point, but much like Mark, I've been around for I think it's my 44th year actually coaching either at the collegiate level or at the professional level or in the private sector. So I, like Mark, have also we put our first book out the same year, 2004, Core Performance. Still one of my top recommendations for people to read above my own book actually. And as Mark said, we've been part of a mutual admiration society for now. Well, I think over 25 years, because Michaela's going to be 26, and Michaela was not born on my first visit to the then International Performance Institute back in that day. So
Kayla may have been conceived in that during that vacation.
that's possible. Not probable, but possible.
Hey, Michael, you know what I realized with all of our years of experience, the reason they ask us to introduce ourselves is they just want to do like a cognitive function test to make sure that we can still remember that piece of it.
I was thinking because they figure most people will have forgotten who we are because we're so old.
That as well. So with that being said, listen, we've had a relationship for a really long time, and I think one of the main things I loved, if we go all the way back to where we started, Michael just mentioned the International Performance Institute. To paint the picture for you, I'd gone from Washington State and Idaho, like sports science, exercise science, nutrition degrees, undergrad, masters. Went to Georgia Tech and did the whole collegiate thing for a while, which is absolutely awesome in Atlanta prior to the Olympics. And then had this crazy dream to try to create the most optimal environment that we could for elite athletes. The reality of that looked like I went down and created this International Performance Institute. It was the sports science hub of voluntary tennis, Ledbetter Golf, Adidas Soccer Academy. What else? Got all those different types of things. So like 6 different things, really cool. And what it ended up being was 1,200 square feet of potential with a tennis court outside, right, Mike, with a med ball wall, which was a tennis wall in the middle. We ran on a sidewalk down the side of a building that was canted. We had no budget. I think I about cut that finger off right there, trying to get through a steel belted radial to throw little discs of weight in for a resisted running type thing. And that was it. Oh, and the Mickey Mouse kiddie pool, because that's what we needed to put in front of the ice machine to cold plunge. And yet there's these great articles written, which is where I came across Michael's, and Michael was doing something similar in Boston and even doing this combine training back in the day and setting this new industry and paradigm. And that's kind of where the intersection started, my way to Mike and Mike to mine. Difference was we had warmer weather.
Yes, the difference was it's funny. So Mike Potenza, who is now the performance director for the San Jose Sharks, had interned with you. And Tony Belafato, who actually lived with me for a while, had interned with you. And they kept coming back and talking about IPI this and IPI that, and you got to see this. And truthfully, I didn't put that much stock in it. And then the famous Outside Magazine article comes out. And one of my good friends comes in and throws this Outside Magazine on my desk and said, look at this. This guy does a lot of stuff similar to what you're doing. And I thought, wow, this is the IPI guy that Tony was talking about and that Potenza was talking about. And Daryl was in all the pictures. So Daryl Eto, who would also go end up becoming a really good friend. I knew Daryl kind of through the NSCA circuit because at that time we were just all starting out, and I had been going to the NSCA conferences probably since I think 84 might have been the first one that I went to in Pittsburgh. And I think that's where I actually met Daryl. I think he was actually at Arizona State at that time, or no, University of Arizona. Now that I
Yes.
think about it, the other school. And And so I called him. I think I had his number. I must have called him because there was no email. This is the other thing people don't realize at that time. And said, hey, we'd like to come down and just kind of be a fly on the wall. And as Mark said, they had nice weather. I said to my wife, I remember saying, I came with my wife and my sister-in-law. I was like, if it stinks, we'll go to the beach. And it didn't stink, right? We became fast friends on day one in about a 2 hour time span. I tell everybody the same story. I watched for probably 2 hours with a yellow legal pad. People would know what that is. I had a pen where I wrote things down because we also didn't have computers at that time. I don't believe anybody had a laptop computer, I don't think. And I know I didn't. And and then Mark said, would you like to come to our staff meeting? And I was like, wow, that's awesome. I'm going to get to go to this staff meeting. I said, what are you going to do? And he's like, we're going to ask you questions for an hour. And I looked like, oh, I'll come to that meeting, I guess. That was not, I thought there might be something more interesting than that. But we spent an hour in that meeting, and then we spent 2 hours at lunch with Ranch.
Oh
What's
yeah, Boston
yeah,
Consulting Group,
yeah,
Boston High.
going over plans for what would become Athletes Performance. You had them rolled out on the table. You had architectural drawings. You had everything. So it was
I did.
that's the first meeting, and then after that, it was there were annual meetings probably at least every year, either at a conference or coming to visit in Boston or coming to visit in Arizona. So
Yes,
we've been doing this for a long time.
we have. And I mean, it kind of gets to this main point about when we started talking about doing our educational platforms together and the rest. But, and you and I've talked about this from the beginning, the difference between like the collaboration versus the competition. And it's funny, the story that you just told is so genuine. And everyone on our team, that open growth mindset. And I say that with Michael talking about the outside magazine. I look like an asshole. I look like I
I
had
didn't say that. I didn't.
top, no, whole thing like super intense. Didn't like any of the media type stuff. But as you realized when you first came down, we were all so passionate about this open growth mindset to like, go do this stuff. And I will tell this group the collaboration that Michael and I have enjoyed over the time. I wouldn't be who I am personally, let alone professionally, without it. I remember flying back up, and Mike was gracious enough to allow me to stay with he and Cindy and the dogs. And I remember that I go to bed every night before 9 o'clock, never miss. Michael and I stayed up at least till like 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning talking shop. No adult beverages, I don't think were even consumed during that point.
On your side, they weren't, but on my side, I believe they were actually. But I did convince you at one point to drink a couple glasses of wine with Cindy. So I've been one who's managed to break down some of the barriers. But the
Yes,
funny
you
thing
did.
to say about Outside Magazine is, I actually remember looking at the picture and thinking, oh, I don't know if I'm going to hit it off with this guy. He doesn't exactly look like my type because you had the crossed arms and the flat top, and you were standing on a stability ball, Mark. I still have the picture, so I
That's
can.
true. With like 135 pounds. I don't think it was small.
But yeah, it's funny, like you said, because, and I tell people these stories all the time, but we never were worried about, I don't know, stealing each other's stuff. It was just from day one, it was kind of like, hey, open book. This is what we're thinking about doing. Well, this is what we're doing right now. And we were kind of doing it. I used to always say Mark was trying to build like Rodeo Drive, and I was running a Walmart up in Boston. And but we had a Walmart that was up and running. It was running. We were making money. But I wanted to learn, and you wanted to learn, and it was a perfect opportunity. And I remember, I can still remember saying to people, because you were 30 years old at the time, because I believe I'm going to say you're 55 right now. Am I right?
Yes.
Yep. So
Good
you're
memory.
10 years younger than me. I was 30. I was 40. You were 30. And I remember thinking, wow, because I looked at programs and I asked you 20 questions trying to figure out how we had crossed paths or why we thought so much alike. And we couldn't find one common denominator between you and I. There was not one point at which any of our mentors had ever even connected, much less that we had the same mentor. Yet somehow we had arrived at a very similar kind of, I mean, not even, I think, intellectual, ethical, moral place. We were very, very similar people from the get-go
Mhm.
who really valued, and I've always said Mark's strongest ability is his ability to attract other people like him. And I loved that because the people that I met, I'm still friends with everybody that I met. I
Yep.
still, I still keep, I keep in touch with Darcy, and I keep in touch with Chad, and I keep in touch with Sue. And there were just so many wonderful people, especially in that first early group. Brandon Marcello was I think an intern probably in that IPI group when I
Yep.
was first down there. But uh, I always talk about the outliers moments. If people read Outliers, and they talk about being alive in the Renaissance.
Mm,
And I felt like that was where we were. We didn't know we were there, but
yep.
we were right in the middle. And I give Mark credit all the time. He changed the field. He started talking about performance enhancement specialists, and he started talking about elasticity, and he literally changed the language that people were going to speak. And a lot of that came out of the initial core performance book. So
Yep.
it was just a wonderful time to be a young strength coach who didn't want to be a meathead, didn't want to be conventional, didn't want. That's why sometimes now I look and think, my God, we were progressive 25 years ago, and then there's people who still haven't caught up to where we were leaving at that point in time. So,
But when you go through this, the relationship, I still remember having people that, the Mike Richters and others of the world that were looking for people and said, "Oh, you need to go see Michael Boyle. You need to go train with Michael. You need to go do this." And I think that was always this point of, like the trust that we had, seeing the world the same way. If we couldn't solve it, we, really would trust people to help us solve that. And I mean, that really kind of goes to this underlying thing of where the field was. And quite frankly, I'll quote Amy, my wife, it was egotistical. Everybody was taking pounding their chest, taking credit for athlete success, and they're this and they're that. And even in the free market, it was a really goofy time. And what I loved about what our staffs had together, and then that continued to grow through our community, was open growth mindedness, share everything we have. What are we solving for? The diversity of thought, the diversity of the books, the diversity of kind of like the global inputs, global best practices that we're all having, and then kind of figuring it out, which is also super important for this group, not just for a singular individual or hypothetically or to give a presentation. What I loved about Mike, what you guys are doing is up there, I would go up and I would jump in your NHL hockey group and train with those guys, get my ass absolutely kicked. But at the same time, every 15 minutes, you were rolling in groups. When you came to see us in Florida, in the afternoon, we trained up to 144 kids an afternoon. So we were rolling through the same thing. And it did look very similar of where we kind of landed to give great training at scale, but still do the individualized stuff. And I think that's where, it's one thing to find the best science and then find out the best people to help you run the best methodology to your application. But then how do you operationalize that and then do it over a sustainable period like you have for 35 years, like, and do it, like with those same people you're saying, they bring smiles to my face. And I think that's a big piece of this collaboration, that we were in it together, we're solving it together, we're sharing it with a lot of other great people who are also contributing. And I mean, I think that's the foundation. And another thing for this group, when you talk about collaboration, is like what Perform Better also did with bringing that culture together with Chris Poirier and the whole team.
Mhm.
It
I
was
was going
great.
to say, when you were saying that, that was the first thing that came to mind, was that suddenly we were there, and then we were finding like-minded people. Because again, and this is what I give Chris all the credit for this. There was a time when you talk about Amy's that, egotistical. There was a time when you were one of the best performance people in the field. You weren't probably a great guy to be around. You were maybe downright unpleasant. And I think we took it to a point where people started, wow, I can enjoy coming to these seminars, and I can ask questions, and no one's going to bite my head off, or no one's going to treat me like I'm stupid.
Yeah.
And I think we created, or helped to create, a really good learning environment. And that's where you think like the ripple effect, and with the ripple effect of what you did with core performance. And you think of the number of people that are out there, the whatever, the Lukes of the world. I mean, there's so many, the tree. I started actually, someone asked me about doing a coaching tree. And and you look at the coaching tree and you think, like, for me, Dwayne Carlisle was one of my first athletes
Love
that
the
came
one.
out and became a strength coach. Chris Doyle was one of my first athletes that came out and became a strength coach. And these guys, and with us, we've got sort of, Mike Potenza. It's kind of, the one branch of two trees because there
Yes.
were guys that were actually in both places at certain times. Shad, was in both places. There were guys that were with me, that were with you. I was with you for a year. I was a athlete's performance employee for 1 year, and
Yep.
it's so intermingled, but in a really really good way. I think that, and I try to not be, I don't know, egotistical, conceited about it, but we really did change the field.
Mhm.
And the whole idea, I still get shit about the whole functional training thing. I didn't intend, I just intended to be a training person,
Yeah,
but human kinetics sort of chose the word functional for the
sure.
way that I was doing things. And I tell people that story all the time. They wanted me to write a book on functional training for sports, and I said, nah, I'm the wrong guy. I don't even know what it is. And the editor said, I think Ed Burke, I think was his name, said, um, we think what you're doing is functional training. And I said, so I can write whatever I want. You're going to call it functional training for sports? And he said, yep, that's exactly what our plan is. You just write what you're doing. And the weird thing, you talk about our parallel lives. You were writing, I remember going and looking at core performance and thinking, my God, he's writing a really similar book that yet was very different, but similar. And they, like I said, they came out at the same time, and there was never worry about, I wasn't worried, oh, is Mark going to sell more books than me? Will Mark become, more famous than I become? That it was just, hey, Mark's writing a book. I'm writing a book. This is great. We can promote each other's books. There's just so much that we've been able to do over what now is emerging as a lifetime in the field,
Yeah,
because it's been,
absolutely.
we're a little bit different in the sense that I was just listening to somebody talk on a podcast the other day, and they were saying that there aren't a lot of strength coaches that have gotten to retire
Fair.
because of the nature of the field. And we're going to be able to retire out of our own sports performance world that we created. And I
Yep.
think that's a really cool thing.
Well, it's Mike spot on. And I think, functional training for sport, I recommended and referred to more people than my own book. And it's funny because I think we originally, with Craig Friedman, the man of the rest, like we're pointing that book more at like the men's fitness, men's health reader, right? Rodale published it, didn't want to be on the cover at all. And all of a sudden, you realize that even though we try to do it real simple that way, it's probably a better entry level coaching education book. And so you just kind of start to look at like what we learn is these simple things done savagely well. But even though you mentioned about the retiring thing, I think it's the power of like what we're doing in this ongoing education. You've never stopped. Like you've never stopped. I'm listening to podcasts, you're listening to podcasts, we're going to things, we're asking people, we invite them in. I mean, that's one of the greatest thing of mentorship and education, which you guys still do an amazing job of. Our team does an amazing job of 26, 30 countries that we probably both touch. And then walking through the doors and sharing, here's exactly what we're doing every single day. Look at it, learn from it. Here's how we failed. Like, don't do these things. And I think that's the part that still brings the fulfillment for both of us to stay in it as long as we have.
Oh, no question. I still enjoy learning. I've got a bunch of young guys now that I follow, in terms of on social media, and I contact these guys. I go right out, I go in their direct messages and say, hey, and my name's Michael Boyle. I'm a strength coach in Boston. I don't assume that they know me. I have no idea. I'm just some old guy, but I'm trying to develop my next network of young people. But it goes back to, like you talked about, the idea, the collaboration. You get a group like Inspire, you meet a guy like Ravi who says, hey, there's a bigger way to get more reach. And then
Yep.
suddenly you just look and think, hey, why not? And then, like, for us, whether it's Craig, like for you, for me, it's been, a lot of it's been Kevin Carr, but just developing educational products for people so that you can continue. And yes, obviously, people talk about it. Are you're trying to make money, you're looking for clicks. I'm like, I could give a shit about clicks, to be honest, at this point, and about money. I'm not worried about either of those two things anymore. But I am really worried about the field.
Mhm.
And I want it to be better because I feel like we've made a really big impact and things are better, and there's a lot of coaches that are better educated, and
Yep.
there's a lot that aren't. So the good thing, and it's sort of like you talk about growth mentality versus scarcity mentality. I look at it from the growth mentality standpoint. It's great because there's so many coaches out there that really aren't and in my mind, upskilled to the level that I would love to see them at so that they can have an impact. Because now, and you're doing the same thing, our bigger impact is on the adult market. Our bigger impact is the kind of aging baby boomer.
Yep.
And that market, I mean, if anybody's, if you're into making money, that's the place that you go make money. Professional athletes are going to come and go. There's
Yeah.
going to be an endless supply of people Mark Verstegen and Mike Boyle's age who want to, all you want to do is age gracefully, right? I don't want to live forever. I don't think I'm gonna, but I'd like to be as functional, bad word, right? But as functional as possible. I don't think it is a bad word. I want to be able to to walk and to ride a bike and stay, for me, that we're up here in this beautiful little barrier island. I can ride my bike every day that I want to when the weather is nice. And
Yep.
I want to be able to do that. I can walk every day that the weather is nice, and I want to be able to do that. I got my fireplace going right now, and I want to be able to go out and get wood, and I want to be able to split wood, and I want to be able to. There's just the life skills that you want to have as an adult become really important. So I feel like we're aging well with the profession.
Yeah, agreed. And listen, I think it goes to like everybody that's consuming, both of our various education and the tree of people that you mentioned earlier out there offering additional and complementary education. Like when you focus on what people should understand, what was elite performance training 20, 25 years ago, we've essentially democratized that to this, not about lifespan, but yes, much more about health span. But we love to call it play span, to do what you're talking about, do the thing you're passionate about with the people that you love doing it with for as long as you can. And that's essentially the democratization of this performance industry to proactive health and healthcare 2.0. It's the same stuff. It's what the recommendations that we get now. Unfortunately, through YouTube and the rest, it's become incredibly overcomplicated. And the great piece that I get jazzed about now is you and I are always trying to worry about back in the day, someone's functional state. How are they showing up? Are we overreaching them? Like to know heart rate variability or to know their sleep quality or to get that level of feedback. And now in today's world, through computer vision and all the wearables, like we're getting greater insights to make more precise recommendations, to create a simple game plan that people can do every day. And it doesn't need to be complicated. It actually needs to be quite simple to the things that you just stated. And that's where I love it. I mean, the great research article read this morning, fish oils plus vitamin D and exercise stop aging.
Yeah.
So eat your fish, eat your walnuts, eat your flax seeds, eat your stuff, get outside, get your walk or ride your bike. It's good. You're like 90% of the way there.
Seriously, and that it's funny. I tell our coaches all the time now, and I remind them over and over again. I tell them we're not in the fitness business. We are in the life-changing business because that's really what we're doing. And I think when you can recontextualize your job that way in terms of what's my job? Well, my job is to change every person's life that comes into our facility in a positive way. And the biggest thing with that, like you said, is if you can just get somebody to show up 2 days a week and do strength work and get their heart rate up,
Mhm.
the impact that you're making is massive.
Agree.
Massive.
Yep.
Because when you look at things, and people are dumb, right? They say, it's grip strength or it's leg strength or I mean, yes, those are proxies for anti-aging, but that just means you need to strength train and grip things, and you need to strength train and use your legs. And it's the same thing, VO2 max is a great, yeah. What does that mean? Well, it means you need to interval train. It means you need to do things that are going to be a little bit uncomfortable. And if you can just get that stuff done, like you said, but what we've realized is it's
Always been.
always been relatively non-complicated, but you need to understand the complicated part to make it not complicated.
Agreed.
Because it's when you understand the complicated part, you can easily visualize the simplicity and be able to say, hey, this is all you got to do.
Yeah.
And you broke it down, right? You started thinking, right? Movement prep, elasticity, strength. I mean, if you really look at the fundamentals of core performance, That's a pretty simple book.
Yep. Mindset, nutrition, movement, recovery.
Right. But the underpinnings of it are pretty complicated.
Yes.
But it's not. In the big picture, it's not at all in terms of it's tissue care, right? Okay, take care of your tissue. It's tissue preparation, get yourself warmed up. And that's the stuff I lose my mind because I can't believe I'm still arguing with people about tissue prep and about tissue temperature. And I look and think, these should be like, people talk, these should be settled science at this point. I shouldn't have to try to explain to you why stretching is good or
Yes.
why warm up is good. I shouldn't have to do that. But that's where I realize we've still got a lot to do because we're still with a certain segment of our field arguing about things that should be settled science.
Agreed. Agreed. And listen, for this group watching this, Mike and I were both born sons of principals, high school principals. And I think we've always kind of based it on these principles that we've had around the simple things done savagely well. And like I said, when we kicked this off, I have never learned more from any one person than Michael. And a lot of that goes to this open growth mindset, creating the community. And Michael, I think we've had a ton of fun just continually educating, self and learning from the people why we do it. And it's why we love this field. And I think what the reoccurring theme is why we love to help so many people in this field and, care for all those people that are like continuing to educate others. It's a special spot to be in. So make sure that you don't look at things as competition, look at them to collaborate and do it as much as you can. Mike and I still look forward to doing that. Make sure that we're doing our continuing education, however you like to digest it, get it. But some of these things that Mike's team and our team are doing, it's really good. It's really precise. It'll be a strong return on your involvement. And then ultimately, there's still a really big market, whether you love sport at the highest level in youth or whatever that's going to be, or first responders and special operations, population health inside corporations, community centers, regardless of where you want to find it. It's equally as relevant today as it was 30 years ago, and it's only getting more and more in the mainstream conversation. So I just want to be more like Mike.
I want to be well. I always tell people the one thing in my lesson is if you meet someone 10 years younger than you who's smarter than you, don't get offended, get to know him. Because I could have been like, man, I don't think I like this guy. He's 30 years old. He knows too much. And I was the polar opposite. I thought, wow, this guy's like the little brother I didn't know I had lost somewhere along the way. And I said, the more time I can spend talking to this guy, the better I felt because you always made me feel good about what I was doing. It always made me more
Ritual.
excited because you thought bigger than I. Like I thought big, and then I met you, and I was like, Jesus Christ, that like he's crazy. I mean, athlete performance was crazy. And I know we have supposed to only got a half hour, but you showed me the plan. You had it all rolled up. You unrolled it, and I said, "Where is this?" And you looked at me and said, "You said I don't know. It's either in California or in Arizona." And I said, "You got all these detailed plans, and you're not even sure where this place is yet." And you said, "No, I will." I don't know, a couple months, 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is. I got a couple more things to iron out, and I thought, this guy's out of his mind. Like I can't believe I couldn't believe the level you were thinking on. And then you made it all happen, which is the beauty of it, right? You look at someone and think, hey, I got this crazy big idea, but you had the ability, you could always do it to athletes, you could always do it in the corporate setting, whatever it was, to sell the big idea and to make people listened to you. I used to say to people all the time, whatever Mark's selling, people by the time they're done, they're buying. At the end of the talk, people are like, okay, I'm officially on Team Mark now. Where are we going next? And that was just a cool quality. I mean, hey, it's carried you a long way. You've
No,
done it, my friend.
I'll tell you where the courage comes from was knowing that if we're going to risk it all and lose it all, there's no doubt in my mind that you and Cindy would allow Amy and I to come in and get back on our feet.
Oh, yeah, I would have hired you in a second. Don't worry. I would
I
have.
mean, that's the security of like, listen, second, when you say that quality if we are going to talk about something, it needs to be deeply meaningful. It needs to be highly efficacious. And I've got people in my life, you at the very top, who would say absolute bullshit, like absolutely. But when you've had these conversations with great people like yourself, like we did through all the years, you felt comfortable enough to say, hey, listen, there's a lot of goodness here. We just want to share it with you. And I think that's where that responsibility, genuinely, that we both brought to the field. Not always right, but here's how we're thinking about it. And we have enough conviction around it that we're going to go give it a go. Might fall flat on our face, but it's worth the journey, worth the path going down. We've thought it out. And that's why I've always appreciated our friendship, because it's always been just based on the truth. And I think we both had a ton of fun, and also learning as much from one another's clients. Like when you go talk about customer experience and the education is like, yeah, I remember George, I couldn't even like freaking stand after our workout. We were front squatting forever. We were RDL and we were like doing our sprints. And we sat down at the end. I'm looking at these guys and like, how long have you guys been with Michael? And we started talking. I think we talked for a half hour, but it was great from the athlete insights that you would gain, and about what their worlds were like and what was important to them and what wasn't. And, I just, again, it's just a big pool of goodness, but it would have never happened without, like allowing one another to just come in and being fully transparent and just open armed and like, yeah, this is it. That's what's made it so valuable. So thank you so much. And you and I both expect our teams to go out there and do a great job with the communities that are going to continue to engage with both our educations.
Oh, absolutely. That part I don't worry about at all because we've both got excellent groups of people creating the product. And
Agreed.
that's the to me that's the real legacy is when it's not about you anymore and you can kind of your job is to now stand on the sidelines. I always tell I'm everybody's assistant. When people go, "What do you do?" I said, I'm the maintenance guy, I'm the plumber, and I'm everybody's assistant."
Always have been. Like that's my ultimate job and has been from the beginning. And I think if you really lead well, you lead side by side or from behind and just try to help people achieve their best. And then we get it, kind of the definition coaching. I love you and miss you, brother.
All right, I feel the same way. This, like I said, when they asked you to do this, I was like, "Yeah, how long?" Like, I got all day.
Yeah, well, we're gonna do it in person again soon. Great to see you, Michael.
You too.